I'm wondering if you fight the temptation to constantly look inward in your books. I mean, certainly, inevitably, we see in a Paul Auster book that infamous relationship of a text within a text versus reality, which is, in fact, fictive reality. And I'm wondering if Brooklyn Follies was an effort to kind of combat that, or is it just a matter of where the narrative leads you? Did you plan these books at all, or do you write on impulse just as you do with the title?
Well, the Brooklyn Follies had a strange history. It was a book that I started thinking about and planning for way back in the early 90s. The idea of writing a comedy with many different intersecting characters. In that original plan, my original plan, it was going to be a third-person book, and Willie Gurevich, Willie G. Christmas, and Mr. Bones were going to be characters in this large novel. It was to begin with them, and I started the chapter with Willie and Mr. Bones in Baltimore, and I realized I was falling in love with these characters. I decided that I wanted to make a short lyrical novel about them, so I broke them out of the bigger book, and then the structure of the big book collapsed, and I didn't know what to do. And years went by before I figured out a solution. And by that time, the world had changed quite drastically, so a lot of new material came in. But it was something I've been thinking about for a long time.
Huh. Well, the ending of the Brooklyn Follies and the ending of this book share certain similarities in relation to political events. I mean, there's the old axiom that you should never write a book that is didactic or political in some sense, and yet inevitably there is this tension between the very real events that are in our world versus this escape into your novel. And I wanted to ask whether you have had these particular endings, I don't want to reveal the ending of Man in the Dark, as a way of finding a way to respond through fiction to certain emotions you might have about current events.
Yes,
what's the situation?
Well, this is a particularly personal book. Well, they're all personal, but this one has a special tone, I think. I think there are two main sources of inspiration. Number one is the 2000 election debacle. Yeah. I can't tell you how outraged and frustrated I was by what happened. Gore won the election. He was elected president. And then the Republicans, by political and legal maneuvering, stole it. Yeah. And to my great horror, America just sat back and let it happen. So I've been living for these past 7.5 years, going almost 8 now, with the eerie sensation that we're living in a parallel world, that we're no longer in reality. That reality is that Al Gore is coming to the end of his second term. There's no war in Iraq. There might not have been 9/11, and a host of other things that Bush has inflicted on us, and it's going to take so many years to undo. So that was one burning thought in my head as I started the book. The other was the horrendous death of one of my best friend's sons in the Israeli army, David Grossman.
Yeah, who you dedicated the book to.
Yeah, it's dedicated to him and his family and in memory of his son, Yuri, who was just 20 years old. And he was killed in, I think, 1 or 2 days before the ceasefire in 2006 when Israel was fighting Lebanon. His father, who's a great man and a great writer, was agitating for peace, begging Olmert to declare a ceasefire. Just as he's going to see the prime minister, his son is killed.
Yeah,
it was horrifying, and I loved David a lot. And this news was so shattering to me that I had to do something with it.
I mean, but I'm wondering, though, going back to this question of whether a novel should be didactic, I mean, you kind of face a peril here of being almost overtly political. And in the end of both of those books, Brooklyn and this one, you have the sense that we are, of course, living in the weird world around us, that inevitably, despite the fact that we cannot necessarily do anything about this, there is still this comfort of life, just as I suppose that with a book, when one escapes from life, there is, of course, this comfort of a book. So I want you find yourself in this, I suppose, imbroglio to some degree.
Well, I don't think so, because I don't think of it as didactic at all. I mean, I'm not preaching anything. I'm simply telling a story.
Yeah.
And if certain elements of our contemporary political life enter into that story, so much the better. I mean, it just doesn't. It's not an issue for me.
Well, this also falls into line with the Auster eye-popping moment that I see throughout all of your books, in which we're alluding to this, and I don't want to necessarily give it away in this book, but there is often, within this calm and meditative valley of text, we get settled into this, and then all of a sudden, there's some extraordinary thing happens, like the party scene, the moment in the Book of Illusions, or some incredible act of violence.
The party scene with
the woman and the spilled beverage,
yes,
and the outburst.
That scene. Yes.
I mean,
okay.
but that is what I call, I suppose, the Auster fucked up moment, where all of a sudden, we're not so happy and rosy here. And I wanted to ask you about this, because I find this in almost every one of your books. Is this a way to remind the reader that they are, in fact, reading a book, that as they enter into this relationship with the text, they get kind of cozy, they get kind of lost, and then all of a sudden there's something so deeply unsettling that reminds us that what we are reading is a book? Is this why you have
there are two questions. First, I want to respond to that scene in the Book of Illusions. Zimmer, the narrator, is a man in total distress, and we know that very well. And he's shut himself up in a room for almost a year to write a book. He's traveled around to film archives, living alone in hotels. He doesn't see anybody, and he's lured out to this party, and of course he misbehaves. But I don't think it's something shocking. It's the absolute culmination of everything he's been living through for the last period of his life. So I never imagined that as a shocking scene.
Well, it's a shocking scene because of the effect it has on this other professor who's sitting there, and that he is unable to see her clear emotional distress during that particular moment. Therefore, it stands out more so, and then we really know that the guy is troubled. I mean, it seems to me that what happens is you have a character often who has a past, who has some deep trauma that he is trying to overcome, and then, as if to affirm the trauma, you have then what I am calling the fucked up Auster moment to confirm it. And
I just don't look at it that way. But anyway, to talk about the awareness that one is holding a book in one's hands, yes, of course, I'm very interested in that. I mean, who's kidding whom? You're reading a book, and I think it's interesting to let that be part of the book, if it's applicable.
Sure.
Sometimes I've been very interested in that question. Other times there's different kinds of stories I've written that it doesn't apply. It all depends. But in this latest book, for example, it is a book about emotional states, which are revealed often through the imaginary material August Brill, the narrator, main character, is telling. So it's complex, and we go into his mind as we're hearing the story he's making up.
Yeah.
It's not that he's just diverting us with a story. We're learning something about him.